We might start. We're nearly more than 5 minutes past the start time. Can we start? Go on to the next slide, please. Good afternoon, everyone, and Budjuri Gamarua. In the language of the Gadigal people, I've opened today's webinar, and I want to take the opportunity to acknowledge the traditional owners of all the areas that we're all calling from today and acknowledge their connections to land, waters, and culture. And I'd also like to pay respect to elders past and present. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Ed Chan. I'm from Mott MacDonald, and I've been leading a joint team between Mott MacDonald and EY in supporting AEMO in running the CER data exchange co-design process. So we've got a few of us from Mott MacDonald and EY here today that would take various parts in both presenting and answering questions for this webinar. And of course, we also have Rachel from AEMO here as well, and we've got Anoop, I think I can see that he's online as well from AusNet, and I think we've got other. I think I've seen Arena represented here as well. So we have a number of people here who could answer different questions. Next slide, please. So here's the agenda today. We've only got 1 hour with you. I'm pretty sure we should be able to get through most of them and get to the Q&A part. So after I finish here, I'll hand over to Rachel, and then Alex from Mott MacDonald would take us through the overview of the CER data exchange and the co-design process. I'll come back on and talk about the final outputs and the recommendations, and we'll then hand over to Rachel at AEMO to talk through what the next steps will be. And hopefully there will be time for Q&A and closing remarks. Next slide, please. Now, did we have a housekeeping slide? I think we did, didn't we? Can we go back to the housekeeping one, please? All right. So as you can see here, we are recording this webinar. So this once we finish here, this will be put on the AEMO website. We are planning to put this on tomorrow. And for those of you who have registered, we will certainly be sending you an email let you know that's happening. A little bit about the functionality. So as you can see, the attendees have been muted. We do have the Q&A function here, so please submit your questions throughout the webinar through the Q&A functions. We do have the upvote button as well. So if there are questions that you like and there are questions that are the same as what you want to ask, please upvote them. We are not curating questions, so whatever you put in there today will come up and will be visible to all. If there are questions that we don't get to today, please email us at the email address that you can see on the screen there, and a member of our team would be in touch. And finally, our plan is to go through the entire presentation deck first. So we will do the content, and then we'll take Q&A at the end. All right, let's get started. Rachel, over to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Ed. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachel Rodriguez-McGowan, and I've been leading the CER Data Exchange Industry Co-Design Project for AEMO for the past 6 months. Before we get into the webinar and the final deliverables, I wanted to sincerely thank all of our stakeholders, including those who are here on the call today, everyone who attended the workshops, and the countless others who have been part of this project. Together, we've undertaken a significant and impactful co-design process, and all of your contributions have helped to shape this reform. It's been amazing to see the interest everyone's shown in it and the willingness to work with us to get to this milestone, so we sincerely appreciate it. I also want to thank Arena, because without their support, this project wouldn't have been possible. And just to express that the thoughts here today aren't the views of the government or Arena, they're based on the feedback we've gotten from stakeholders throughout this process. The project's been a great learning for the project team as well as industry. We've covered a number of several topics over this period, and we'll work through it at the webinar today. So thank you once again. We hope you've enjoyed the project, and we look forward to sharing these insights with you. I'm going to hand it back over to Alex Bortolucci to give you an overview of the CER Data Exchange and our co-design activities to date. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Rachel. So over the next few slides, I'll provide a summary of the CER Data Exchange and a bit of a recap of the co-design process and activities for those of you who may not have been along the journey with us. So at a very high level, the CER Data Exchange is intended to be a secure and common infrastructure which facilitates the exchange of standardized CER data between industry organizations such as networks, retailers, aggregators, and many other emerging market entrants. By implementing standard integrations and transactions, the intent of the CER Data Exchange is to reduce reliance on the fragmented point-to-point connections that are often complicating and adding cost to data exchange. Now, we know there are a number of misconceptions about the CER Data Exchange, and therefore, just to briefly clarify, it's a foundational enabling tool which provides secure data infrastructure but integrates existing systems rather than replaces. It facilitates data sharing only. It's not intended to have anything to do with device control. That remains a separate part of the energy sector. It's connecting to existing data sources and it won't be storing or controlling them. And although the CER Data Exchange primarily supports this organization to organization data sharing, addressing these issues will be how it benefits end consumers of the power system. We see there as being three key drivers for this initiative. The first we've kind of already alluded to, and that is, well, it's most clearly highlighted in AEMO's integrated system plan, which emphasises that the transition to a high CER future, which is very clearly outlined in the ISP, relies heavily on robust, transparent data flows that manage the complexities of a diverse energy system. At the moment, CER data is transferred through a network of fragmented, bespoke different systems, many standards, many systems of records, and other capabilities which are not designed to handle the scale and the complexity of CER data, both now and into the future. A number of trials, such as Project Edge, Project Symphony, and other UK and international best practice, have quantified the significant benefits of efficient integration of CER. They've also built a strong case for change and highlighted that the need for secure, standardized, and interoperable CER data exchange is urgent, and it's now. The government has also recognised this in the National CER Roadmap, which is under the Defining and Implementing a CER Data Exchange, which is a key reform priority under the M2 workstream. And we can see from the third pillar on the right-hand side of the screen, efficient CER exchange of CER data will generate improved value to all customers and industry participants. For example, consumers will benefit from improved and more diverse service offerings at a lower cost, and through that reduced overall bills with increased access to rewards and more actively participating in energy markets. This project was one part of a much longer term multi-stage process to build the digital foundation that will support the efficient integration of CER into Australia's energy system. It's part of a much larger journey, and the process that we're at has built upon the experience and consolidated learnings from previous CER integration trials that we talked about earlier, such as Project Edge, as well as overseas initiatives such as the UK Digital Spine, both of which demonstrated the value of a data exchange approach. For this particular stage, we deliberately employed a co-design approach to collaborate with industry on the high-level design and implementation roadmap to ensure that the design best achieves maximum long-term value to consumers as well as industry. Based on the stakeholder support to progress this initiative, our final reports and outcomes, which Rachel will speak to and Ed will also, will be a key input into the next stage, being detailed design and implementation. So for those of you who haven't been around for the last 9 months, since June of last year, we worked with the broad cross-section of industry to develop a high-level design and a corresponding implementation approach and indicative costings. The co-design has been an iterative process, gradually refining key design elements and evolving in response to stakeholder feedback throughout this process. And through this phase, we've had fortnightly meetings with our expert working group, which have been crucial to test, refine content and seek in-depth feedback, and then take this to a wider stakeholder group through our industry workshops. I'd like to briefly highlight some of the key pieces of feedback that we saw throughout this process. So during workshop 1, we heard the need to focus on quick wins, but design with an end state in mind. In workshop 2, stakeholders were really supportive of focusing on priority use cases. We also narrowed in on possible ownership models and looked at the best preferred approach for most use cases, which was an AEMO IDX extension. We then released a consultation paper in October, November last year, which really helped to confirm stakeholder perspectives on use case functionality, data sharing capability, ownership, operations, oversight, and data governance. At this stage, we also introduced implementation considerations. During workshop 3, which we held earlier this year, we built on all the feedback that we'd received to date and put this back to stakeholders. And we worked with participants to determine the minimum viable product capabilities, which Ed will talk to in the future, looked at preferred governance, roles, responsibilities, and specifically dived into implementation timelines and the interdependencies with all the other various reforms occurring at the moment. So over the 9-month period, we have undertaken quite an impactful co-design process, and you, industry, have made a significant contribution to shape this reform. Over this project, we've had 250 stakeholders engaged through 3 industry workshops. We received 23 submissions to the consultation paper, and including this one, we've held 3 public webinars. Your feedback, as Rachel mentioned, has been incredibly important to us, and we'd like to take this moment to thank you for your continual interaction, engagement, and investment in the project. And in particular, we'd like to thank the members of the expert working group who, over the course of 15 meetings and 30+ hours, provided invaluable and constructive feedback. So this was a very short snapshot of the feedback we received from stakeholders. I'm now going to pass to Ed to summarise the final outcomes and recommendations from this phase.
Thank you, Alex. Next slide, please. So as Alex was alluding to before, we've had a number of webinars. And for those of you who attended our December webinar, this is probably familiar with you. But for this final webinar, I think it'd be useful to just cover off where this whole process is leading us to. And on this slide here, I'm going to talk you through who's doing it, what's being done, and when it'll be done. So starting from the top, for the CER data exchange, taking into account stakeholder feedback through all the channels, the industry stakeholder preferred model is for AEMO to own and operate the exchange. What that means and what needs to be done over the next period of time, Rachel will talk to, and we have a section of this webinar dedicated to that. But in short, 2 things. The CER data exchange will build upon the foundational capabilities that are being delivered through the market interface technology enhancement project. If you're not familiar with that, that's a parallel project that AEMO has already commenced, and it's working with industry participants to upgrade all the interfaces that current industry have been using. So if you've worked in the industry for a while, things like so the B2B eHub is one of those. The reason why we're leveraging on these foundational capabilities because there are a lot of common things that both existing systems will use as well as the CER data exchange. And this is a way to achieve a level of efficiency and reduce the incremental cost in delivering the exchange. Now, over the course of the high-level design industry consultation process, we've also heard from industry that we need to start small and grow. So let's not create one big behemoth from day dot. And that's why we are focusing on 3 priority use cases. And all 3 of them will be targeting what we call minimum viable products. So the basic foundational functionalities that will need to be delivered. Those 3 use cases are broad access to CER standing data, sharing of network limits, and also the network support and flexibility capability. Right down at the bottom, you will see that the target implementation date, we've got May 2027 for both the first and second use case, and we've got a tentative on the 3rd one. Now, I won't steal Rachel's thunder. She will talk to the reasons for doing that in the implementation part of the webinar. Next slide, please. So in terms of output, so what are the things that people can download and save on their desktop, or for those of you who would like to print out, these are the things that would be available on AEMO's website likely tomorrow. So in the big red circle is a co-design summary. If you are short on time, that's the document that we recommend you to go to, and that report will outline the key outcomes, how we got to where we are, the various components. And around the edges of that circle are 3 attachments. So we've got a high-level design reference document. So if you're interested in the detail of what each of the use cases are, that's a document to go to. We've also got a high-level cost assessment on the work that EY has done in the incremental cost involved. And then we also have an implementation plan. So those 4 documents together would give you, if you're interested in the next step of the project, what they are, how we intend to implement them. And lastly, but not least, on the bottom left-hand side of the corner is the knowledge sharing report. So this one documents the journey that the team has gone to, and for all of us, key learnings from this, both good and bad. And if industry or anyone who would like to undertake this process again, there might be some learnings that we can go from there. Next slide, please. So diving into a little bit more detail, the co-design summary, as I mentioned before, we will cover the key outcomes of the process. We'll talk through the broad stakeholder agreement, how we got there, a high-level timeline, and we've got a few appendices in there that talks the overview of the data exchange, the co-design process, so the detail of the things that Alex has just taken us through before. I won't dwell too much on this slide. We've got additional slides that talk to each of the attachments, so let's go there. So we've got 2 slides on the high-level design report. So this is where we've got the technical detail, but bear in mind that this is still a high-level design, so we haven't gone into the very, very specific detail. So this report talks about the process that we went through, and we've also detailed some of the stakeholder feedback and how they've been incorporated into our thinking. We've also set out some of the priority use cases, high-level designs here as well. Next slide, please. Now, these are the 3 priority use cases that will be discussed in that report. And the way we have set out the documents, that we've set out the current challenges for that use case, what outcomes we are trying to achieve, and then there's a proposed minimum viable product. So together as a report, it gives you an indication of what problem we're trying to solve, how we propose to solve it, and in there you will also find our discussion on what type of capability from the Mighty project that we are leveraging. Again, pardon my industry jargon, so industry data exchange, IDAM, all the capabilities that are being developed through the Mighty project. We will have a discussion then on what could be leveraged on and what new things we need to build for each of the use cases. Next slide, please. High-level cost assessment. So as part of the process, we have conducted a high-level cost assessment on what the incremental cost is to build the exchange. The reason why we're using the word incremental is that, as I mentioned earlier, we are building upon some of the foundational capabilities that are delivered through another project. Those capabilities are already funded for in that project, so we don't need to spend money on those things, but we do nevertheless have to build new capabilities for that. We've looked at the estimated cost, not just for AEMO, but for industry as well. And I think the next slide would take us through that. And we have in the report broken down the cost over the implementation period and ongoing. Next slide, please. I might spend a little bit of time here, but we will have time for questions later on, and the EY team is also online to answer any questions if you have them for the high-level cost assessment. But pardon pun, at the high level, there we've split the cost into 2 main components. So the cost that will be incurred by AEMO to do the build, test, and the deploy. So that's looking at about $8.7 million there, so in the middle column. We have also made an assessment on what it would cost for industry to integrate into the exchange. So each of the organizations who would like to be part of the project will need to do some of their own integration work, and the implementation costs there for the industry, it's around the 16 million, so about 15.7. So together, to build, test, deploy, and also the detailed design aspect of the 3 priority use cases, the cost is looking at about $24.4 million. Next one, please. I think in this I'm handing over to next steps.
Thanks very much, Ed. As shown in our earlier slides, our final deliverables include a detailed implementation plan. So next slide, thanks, Alex. This plan sets out the key components of how AEMO intends to move to detailed design and implementation for the CER data exchange. This co-design process has provided us with an understanding of what industry wants to do and the value that the exchange can provide to them, and this plan reflects these sentiments. In the plan, we discuss the key phases of implementation, as shown in the indicative timeline below. Once this process has been completed, we'll move through to the endorsement through the AEMO governance process, and then look to start convening industry groups from July 2025. Also in the plan is an overview of the implementation considerations of our 2 proposed work streams, a technical stream and a governance stream. Also included is a Gantt chart that identifies all of the proposed activities that will be needed for the detailed design and the implementation phase. The plan also considers implementation across a short-term and a long-term horizon. The short-term horizon focuses on the detailed design and the implementation, as well as resolving all the technical and regulatory issues that will come up as we work through the use cases. And then the second horizon will look at the long-term arrangement to support the operation for the CER data exchange after that period. Next slide, thanks, Alex. The progression of the CER data exchange will use 2 work streams, and we envisage that there'll be different stakeholders in each of these streams. The first one will be a technical stream that will focus on designing and developing the core digital infrastructure that enables the architecture for each of the use cases we've identified. This group would explore the detailed infrastructure and transaction development, as well as payloads, schema formats, and consider integration with broader IT ecosystems. The government stream will be identifying whether changes need to be made to government regulations, the national electricity laws, or procedures to enable the implementation and the uptake of these use cases. This group will provide advice on governance and regulatory issues, as well as explore external funding options. It'll also need to consider the strategic direction and future structure of the exchange, as well as what enduring forums and working groups will need to facilitate the exchange beyond implementation. It's important to note with these 2 work streams, they are interdependent, so they'll need to be run in parallel for implementation because you need them both together. Next slide, thanks, Alex. So over the next few slides, here is the Gantt chart that we've got in the report that shows the indicative schedule for the project. And through the report itself, we highlight the other connected projects that are happening across the CER reform space. Also embedded in each of these timelines are activities that AEMO typically does through implementation. Based on the 2 work streams that I just showed, these are all the activities that will need to occur for that MVP, detailed design and implementation. In purple, we've got our core digital infrastructure that focuses on documenting the technical aspects of the first 2 use cases as we move to implementation. It's also in that second part where it follows AEMO's standard delivery methodology, where we'll provide proof of concepts, architecture, initial tech specs to industry to prepare for implementation. In the green, we've got the governance workstream, and we anticipate that there'll need to be 4 groups that will need to be created to explore all the regulatory enablers across a staged approach. What we'll look at first up is the regulatory enablers for use case 1, and then the long-term governance framework that we'll need for the CER data exchange. It's also worth noting that across these 2 work streams, we'll continue our collaboration with industry through monthly working group meetings for both of these streams and use the existing forums that we have to discuss all the topics that arise and consultations where necessary. Thanks, Alex. After detailed design, we'll move into implementation. So starting with the core digital infrastructure, we'll focus on building all the technical infrastructure for the 2 use cases. And as with all of the other AEMO projects, we'll have an AEMO and industry testing period, as well as an industry readiness and transition planning period as well, to make sure everyone's ready for implementation. For our governance workstream, if there have been any rule changes that have been identified, we'll work with the AMC to undergo this process and prepare industry for that as well. It's also worth noting that in detailed design, early engagement with the AER and the AMC will be needed to make sure we are ready to go when the technical aspect has been built too. The last thing I want to highlight, and it's highlighted through the report itself, is this project is interdependent with a number of other projects within the reform space, and particularly highlighted in this slide because we are leveraging Mighty, it's dependent on Mighty's delivery. So should there be any changes to that, they will have an impact on this project as well. Thanks, Alex. For the next steps, AEMO will work through our governance process for endorsement to proceed to detailed design and implementation. This co-design has provided us with an understanding of what industry wants to do, the value that this has to industry, and this important input is very helpful as we move towards that endorsement process. It's also been great to have ARENA and AusNet as part of this process too. Then from July, we'll look to convene those technical and governance groups. So those stakeholders who are interested in participating in either of them, please get in contact via the CER Data Exchange website. Well, thank you very much. I think we'll hand it over now to Craig Chambers to start our Q&A.
Thanks, Rachel. I see Tim's been going hard at the Q&A. If I can ask others to also add in some questions, and what I'll do is facilitate those through. If I can ask you to do 2 things, just add your questions into the Q&A at the top of your screen. I think the chat channel's been turned off, and if people could read those and upvote them, I'll filter the questions against those that are voted highly. So the first question is from Tim. Has the federal government's data standards body, who is exclusively responsible for the CDR or consumer data right, been consulted? Have AEMO had approval from DSB to get access to, let alone share CER standing data? I might direct that one to AEMO, and Rachel, if you can answer that.
Yep, perfect, can do. Hi, Tim, thanks for the question. So we've had a number of chats with Treasury who work on CDR, and the exchange is designed to operate alongside CDR. So what we're going to look to do in detailed design is approach how we can broaden that access and where we need to look at these 2 systems working in parallel. And it's just something we need to do as we move forward. I also just wanted to clarify, for those who would like to participate in the working groups, please email, not visit the website. Sorry about that.
I think there's a question here, Rachel and the team. Are we going to be sharing a copy of the presentation from Helen? Maybe just in the context of admin, which you were, I think these will all be shared on the AEMO website.
Yes, correct? That's correct. They'll all be available from tomorrow.
Okay. Then I'll just keep going through those from the list here, and I might add some more of my own if we run out. How will the working group participants be selected? Or will there be independent members? Rachel, do you want to take on that one as well?
Yeah, I think this will follow the same process that the CER Data Exchange Expert Working Group team went through. So we'll ask for nominations across industry, and we'll look at what we want to form with each of these 2 groups and then go from there. We encourage anyone who's keen to participate to put in a nomination when the time comes from July.
Okay. I see there's a lot from Tim here, so I might ask my own one and give some others a chance to kind of provide their questions in. Ed, and maybe this is a question for the EY team as well. The costings that were presented, there was a lot of conversation about what was included in those. Are you able to elaborate further about what was actually included in the costings? Were they really just AEMO costs, or were industry costs included? Could you, or I don't know if Cara can come off mute and maybe explain that in more detail?
Cara, if you're online, I think please jump on and.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Can you guys see and hear me? Yes, perfect. So in terms of the costing, there's a couple of critical things that form the basis on which we did this cost assessment. The first, which we've talked about already, is that the cost assessment very much assumed that the technology that's coming through the Mighty project will be the basis on which we build the CER functionality. That's really important because if we didn't have the 3 modules that are being delivered through Mighty, we would have had to add more cost into the cost buckets that we assessed during the work for the CER data exchange. So what the cost assessment that we took you through today doesn't include is a double counting of those Mighty costs. So Mighty was already approved. We're looking at the additional cost, the incremental costs on top of that. So in terms of the buckets that we then included, so it absolutely includes an estimate of industry costs in addition to AEMO's costs. So when we looked at the AEMO costs, it was really, we looked practically at how will this be implemented. So it really aligns with the working group structure that Rachel took you through. So there's a governance part that has working groups on it. There will be certain effort associated with running those working groups from both an AEMO perspective and an industry perspective. So those costs were estimated over the 2-year implementation period included. The other big bucket of cost, though, is really the effort to do the design, the test, the deploy. So again, those costs we used the basis of the MVP versions of the CER use cases that Ed took you through. We looked at what functionality will be delivered through Mighty, and so what was the incremental functionality to get those 3 use cases up and running. And then we worked really closely with the AEMO team to say, well, what is the effort to actually get those use cases, that incremental functionality up and running? And then we looked at what we thought the additional industry costs associated with using the CER data exchange as the means by which we would exchange information. So really, that was kind of the process at a macro level. Look at what Mighty's delivering, look at the functionality that we need to deliver to operationalise the MVP version of the 3 use cases, and then think practically around, well, what is the effort and the build in order to get those up and running. So short answer is yes, definitely taking into account industry costs and AEMO costs, and sort of a practical version of what are the buckets of costs that would be incurred in order to get to the timeline, which took into account Mighty, which basically means we can't go live any earlier than the end of FY27, and the effort over that period to design, build, test and deploy the 3 MVPs.
Thanks, Cara. All right, so we might move on. So another question here from Tim, which goes into focusing on the sharing of network limits or dynamic operating envelopes. I'm trying not to use acronyms, use case, and providing those limits to CERDI will be mandatory for DNSPs implementing these approaches. Would you expect that CERDI would be replace or operate in parallel with existing DNSP OEM integrations? Maybe this is one for either Anoop or Rachel. Who would like to take this question?
I'm happy to. I would just put some text in there already, but it's a really good question. So within the first few slides, Rachel, I think, touched on the fact that control of devices is not within the use case for the exchange. So accordingly, the DNSP OEM integrations we are looking at right now, for example, for backstop, have a control element. So that wouldn't be replaced, or certainly it wouldn't be DNSP expectation that would be replaced or superseded by the exchange. The exchange sits in that context in parallel to those integrations.
Thanks, Anu. Okay, so one from Liam here. Do you foresee interdependencies between the CR Data Exchange implementation and the implementation of FTA or IPRR reforms, particularly noting the potential interaction between sharing network limits use case and the integrating price responsive resources participation?
Hi.
Rachel?
Yeah. Hi, thanks, Liam. I can take that one. We do anticipate there are some interdependencies with both FTA and IPRR, and as they're being delivered by 2027, we understand there's a lot of data that will need to be shared as a result of those two rule changes and how that needs to happen. So both projects are connecting together to just see how that's going to work as well. So we see the CER Data Exchange as an enabler to help stakeholders kind of use both of those rules and participate in that process as well. And I understand with IPRR, with the VSR guidelines as well, it is one of the questions of how data will be shared too. So we are aware of those. In detailed design, it's something that we'll certainly need to plan out further as to where those connections are and what data sets we'll need to have a look at as well.
I might even ask a follow-on question to that, Rachel. I mean, there's obviously a lot of interdependencies potentially with the CER roadmap and what government's doing. Do you see, you talked about, obviously there's a key dependency with Mighty, and there's obviously key, interdependencies with other reforms going on, but are there other things either from a reform or policy agenda that you see that might impact this project?
I think it will be what data sets need to be shared and at what times they do need to come live as well. I think there's a lot coming on in the reform pipeline for that 2027. So how we make it best for the CER and reform space is something that always needs to be considered with all of these projects. And we're going to continue to unlock value as each of these things start to come online. And that was the aim of what we want to do. It is a key enabler for us to do that. And I think it's a consideration, and certainly what we've heard across industry, that we want to make it easy and we want to make the benefits spread across all the participants and consumers. So let's think about the best way to do that. And I think that's what we've just got to plan for and is considered in our implementation plan as well.
Okay. All right, might move back to the questions. So Darren has one that says, I'm interested to know more about the CR standing data use case. Will it primarily be a better version of the DR register, or will there be new functionality? For example, will it be combined with the Clean Energy Regulator's serial number validation? It would be nice to have a record of battery serial numbers in the event of a product recall. Would that be in scope? Rachel, do you want to grab that one as well?
Thanks, Craig. Great question. There are a number of different projects that look at how the DER registers data quality can be improved. And I think one of the benefits could be once those projects kind of address those issues, you can get that information from the exchange and it can be validated across other sources. So there is a world in which the exchange can do some of those updates and can fill in some of those gaps, but there are a number of different ways it could be done, and this is just one of them that we're looking at as well.
Thank you. All right, so we have a question from Richard. The slides and Q&A answers discuss costs, but don't seem to set out the expected benefits. How have you assessed the incremental benefits and whether they exceed the incremental costs? Cara, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, can do. So in the attachment that's available, we do have a little bit of commentary around benefits. But in this phase of work, the focus was really on doing the assessment of the cost to put in the functionality that we need to operationalise the 3 use cases. And really that was because there's been a heap of project work already done that is specifically looking at the broader costs and benefits of DER orchestration, and in some cases, more specifically, the technology that enables the scalable high volume exchange of data. So for example, Project Edge looked specifically at not only the 6 billion plus net benefit associated with DER orchestration, but a portion of that was specifically point-to-point versus some kind of hub construct to exchange data. So there's quite a bit of evidence already around what are the benefits, particularly in the form of avoided integration costs associated with using a hub kind of construct, a data exchange type construct, as opposed to all industry participants needing to do point-to-point exchange. So there is some commentary in the paper that you can get access to that talks more specifically around the buckets of benefits, particularly honing in on the benefits associated with something like a DER data exchange. Project Edge, for example, quantified those benefits over a 20-year period at just under $500 million. So we're talking really large benefits. So the focus was definitely cost assessment for this phase of work. Benefits cases have been done through other projects. It's not to say that there's not another opportunity as industry goes through the more detailed design phase that we've talked about to re-prosecute whether the benefits are still there and are still at the scale that we think they are. But really the focus for this stage of work was very much around cost assessment to get the exchange up and running, given that there'd already been a significant amount of money spent on doing cost-benefit analyses.
Thanks, Cara. I might stay with you because there's a question that follows on from what you've just answered. So Michael Zhang asks a question. I want to make sure that we have a correct understanding. It was mentioned that the mighty costs are not covered in the high-level cost assessment. Is this for both AEMO and industry? Also, may I ask which parties, DNSPs, FRUMPs, customer agents are being covered under the industry bucket in the high-level cost assessment? Yeah,
great question. So in terms of the mighty costs and those not being included in the numbers that you'll see when we've done the cost assessment for the CER data exchange, they don't include either industry or AEMO costs for mighty. So the mighty business case, which again is available on AEMO's website, has a clear articulation of what they estimate the costs for both AEMO and industry to implement mighty. So because that work has already been done, we've assumed that is approved expenditure from AEMO's perspective through its investment processes, for industry through their investment processes, and we're now just looking at the increment to AEMO and industry on top of that. So the numbers for the CER data exchange don't include any mighty costs, either industry or AEMO. In terms of the assumptions that were made for the industry costs that have been included in the CER data exchange cost assessment, it's really two pieces to that, because there will be some industry participants who are represented on one of the two work groups. So the assumption underpinning the cost to operationalise those working groups over the full 2-year implementation period was that there would be 10 industry participants on each of the two work groups, so 20 in total. Notionally, we said that was a breakdown of 4 DNSPs, 4 retailer aggregators, 2 others. It doesn't really matter what the makeup of that is. It's really that we've assumed that there would be 10 industry representatives on both of those working groups. And then similarly, we had a cost in there for industry more broadly, because obviously it's not just going to be working group industry participants that incur costs to operationalise the use cases that we've talked about. It will be all of industry. So for the all of industry bucket, it's I think it was 31 industry participants in total, and that was based on a bit of analysis around how many participants we would expect to be using the CER data exchange.
Thanks, Cara. Okay, so I might move now to Yvonne's question. How can the detailed design for the MVP start in July 2025, which is before the dynamic operating envelopes rule change, as I think this is one of the use cases and is still in version 6 of the roadmap without a timeline? Rachel. Yep.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the question. Once that rule change starts, or depending on where that moves in that area, we will look to align with it as well. Because I know there's a number of things working through the DOEs, and I have had a look at the NEM reform roadmap. So I think it's moving through our use case and working with everyone else that's kind of doing the rule change as well. And I think the timeline is tied to a number of other things as well, not just the rule change. It just goes in the bucket of there's a number of things that need to happen in parallel as we keep moving forward in the reform space.
Okay, so there's a number of questions here from Tim about role of customer voice in this process, customer involvement in government, in the governance of the ongoing management of this platform, of the exchange. Ed, do you want to take this one just to talk through that as a grouping? I know there's a lot in that, but yeah.
Sure. Alex, can I get you to take us back to one of those implementation slides? I think probably slide 23. Yeah. Okay. So let me focus on the bottom part of that slide where we talk about operational governance and regulatory enablers. And in the context of all the questions that Tim's been asking, we've just completed the high-level design stage, and through that process we've identified a few things that we need to actually go into more detail to develop. One of them, it's about long-term governance framework of the CER Data Exchange. So in both workshop feedback, in written responses to the consultation paper, there are quite a few things that stakeholders have said to us we need to work on from a governance perspective. That's why we've got this work stream there starting from July to take us through, what sort of governance will be needed in this. But we've also got to bear in mind that there's a general consensus through this process that AEMO would need to run this process, and within that framework, there are also levers that we can pull. Specifically about consumers, in the third workshop, we ask those who attended the workshop, what's the best way to engage with consumers in this process? We certainly recognize that what we're doing here will have an impact on consumer, although we are, I think, if we stand back and look at it, perhaps a step away, because there are parties, whether they are businesses, they are organizations or government body that would benefit from this, that they will be using this infrastructure before it gets to the actual customer part. I digress. But the question we asked was, how do we best engage with consumers and or consumer representative through this process? And the feedback from that group was there are quite a few forums already where we've got broad range of consumers represented there. Rather than creating a bespoke CER Data Exchange specific consumer panel, or even nominating or getting consumer representative to nominate, it is far better to actually go through the existing forums for a number of reasons. One, you reduce the level of overhead on the consumer reps. For those of you who've been around this space, you would know that there are few and far between, and they are involved in so much. Like, their time is really, really precious. So we don't want to put that additional overhead. Two, because they are involved in so many of those processes, going through those existing forums would actually allow them to see a number of things, a number of reforms of these processes together, and provide a more comprehensive response. So that's the approach that we have recommended to the steering committee to consider, and this would be taken through the work stream as well. I don't know if AEMO folks here want to add to that.
No, I think the key is keep engaging the consumer reps where possible. There's a number of different forums across AEMO that we also do present to for various projects, and this would be one of them as well.
Okay, I might just keep going. Thanks for that. So there's still a few questions for you, Cara. So you're getting a fair few here. Always the costs are of
you
interest.
Always love the costs.
So Bryn's just wanting a little bit more clarification around the industry cost assumption around participation in the design process. Can you elaborate on the assumptions for bigger industry IT integration costs? Did these come from industry participants? And I think Tim also has the same question.
Yep, gotcha. So so the industry costs, as I mentioned before, really there's kind of two layers. There's participation in the work group, so detailed design, and both that technical and the governance work group. So those estimates were based on an estimate of the number of industry representatives, how much effort we thought it would take those industry representatives on those working groups. And all of these assumptions are in the cost assessment document that you'll get as well. But effectively, we said that over that detailed design period, that would be 2 days per month for each representative on the work group. So that's one bucket of industry costs. For the effort associated with building, testing and deploying the functionality with each of the 3 use cases, we used the AEMO estimate as the basis for that. So we worked with AEMO using a process that we call T-shirt sizing, where we actually got reasonably granular to say, for each of the use cases, what are the chunks of activity that need to happen to get those operational, and whether we thought that they were, based on complexity, how much effort they would take to do. So that was the basis of coming up with the build, test, deploy costs. We then looked at the typical relativity of industry costs versus AEMO costs from things like the mighty business case to give an estimate of what we thought the industry costs would be relative to the AEMO build, test, deploy costs. So that's how we came up with the industry costs. Now, through the expert working group, it was there was lots of discussion around, how do we work out what industry costs are and what's the DNSP version versus retail version versus third parties. And the reality is that every industry participant will be starting this from a different perspective. So in no way is that industry cost bucket intended to be, a representation of, we've gone around to every DNSP and the retailers that we think and aggregators that will be using the hub, because we're just not at a point where that makes any sense, because we're at high level design phase. So at this stage, it was really working with AEMO to come up with what their costs associated with build, test, deploy this functionality, look at the relativity of AEMO to industry costs and what they would be to come up with that second bucket of costs, which is around actually building and deploying the functionality.
Okay, I might. Thanks, Cara, for that, and all the team. It's been great to see the level of interest in this project, and any of these questions we might have, that we may not have answered, we'll get back to you either on the AEMO website or in the next phase of the project. There's still a long way to go, as Ed said. We're still only at high-level design costings phase. We've done a lot of work over the last 9 months to get to where we are, and really appreciate everyone's interest. So I might hand back at this point to Ed, and thanks everyone for your input.
Thank you. One last thing before we all press the end button. So I would just like to reiterate Rachel's opening comment. So thank you for those of you who have been part of this process. As you can see here, we've had a number of workshops, and all of these documents here are what we have produced together with industry input. So all the workshop presentations, summaries, final reports and consultation paper, they are all available for you to access on the website, with the exception of that bottom purple grouping. The workshops, consult paper, webinars are all available for you to look at now. There are quite a few questions, and I think in the chat today. So the CER data exchange, one word, at aemo.com.au. That's the email address that you need to send questions and nominations if you're interested in the working group too. That is all from us today. Thank you for all of you who have come to this webinar, and as we said, please feel free to drop us an email, and really thank you for all the input and all the feedback.